Okay, so I'm going to show my process of going through this tutorial. It's called Animate Your Hero and take him or her to any scenario in ComfyUI. It's by dsigma. What it does is it lets you take two images, a background image and a foreground image, and use those as kind of like guidance for an animation cycle in ComfyUI. So uh, dsigma was helpful enough to was actually quite charitable enough to type out to explain the process. The high level process included some example templates for some example workflows for ComfyUI, and also included some assets which make it easier to get started. I'm going to kind of go over what I went through getting this going. So first, it starts off, I'll just kind of give a high level. It starts off with blending two images together using a segs detector. It's something that lets it automatically basically crop out, like automatically blend two images together before it even gets into AI modeling. Well, AI sampling using using diffusion. Uh, then there's a whole bunch of stuff over here to do with animate diff and prepping the whole project so that it can be animated. And then it uses open pose to control the posing of the character for each frame. And then a clever thing that dsigma did was included a depth map of it's a depth map of basically walking through a scene. So it's as though you're like walking through a street, as well as these are, I forget what they're called. I don't want to change some, MLSD lines that provide some hinting for details on the scene. One clever thing that was done is taking the mask for the walk cycle and turning that into a mask for inpainting. What that does is it basically tells the system where basically borders for where to apply AI modeling so that it doesn't end up trying to like uh, morph the person to it doesn't end up blending the person in with the rest of the scenery. And then there are a bunch of nodes to have your foreground with your pose and your background with using what are called conditioning masks. This thing really chugs. There we go. Okay. Um, and then goes into an actual sampling phase. And this was my result. Now, I didn't use the pose that was provided. It's not the same as the one from the tutorial because I ran into a problem of the pose was too big. It was like 2 megapixels per image, and I was running out of. At first, I was doing it with the GPU, and the GPU was running out of memory. And I have a 10 gig GPU. And then I even tried doing it with just CPU. It's slower, but I figured since I have 32 gigs of RAM on my system, I could maybe get through it and use the CPU, but it just took too slow to get it through the CPU. I let it sit for about like 20 minutes and it still didn't finish. So what I did was I created a section over here. This is a pose saver. And so it loads a video, and then it loads a video and then creates the open pose frames and saves it. And so then, and these were much smaller. I made these 1024 by 1024, 1 megapixel. 1 megapixel it could snap through in like under 5 seconds, but 2 megapixels per image, and it just couldn't complete it all. Um, that was those are my limitations. So I knew how to do this. I knew how to use OpenPose to with a pose estimator to get a new batch of images. So I just did that. Um, yeah. So overall, I think my choice of pose was kind of awkward. Um, So you'll notice, or I'll zoom in, you'll notice it has a hard time figuring out which leg's in front of which leg, and it just kind of instantly jumps from one to the other. It's not very smooth. There are other videos I've seen where they do it a lot cleaner, so I'm going to figure out what's up with that. I also think it might be because there was a frame lost. So if we go to here and we zoom in, you'll barely notice there's one frame missing, but it's not where the knees are crossing. But yeah, it was hard for it to figure out. I think it's because, yeah, it can't quite figure out what leg's in front of which leg based on these bones. So it doesn't know what's in front. So very, very front on animations like this just don't work with OpenPose. But yeah, that's it. Yeah, so I don't know how much more I'm going to do with this. I'm going to try to find another alternative because I think OpenPose just doesn't quite work as well for animation. That's for something that where it's just not changing much and you have to do subtle things like one knee in front of another knee. So I'm going to try to figure out some other techniques. Yep. Oh, and I'll share a link to the tutorial in the comments.